Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of the newly formed Ududuwa Nation.
To have an educational system that works and is good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that overview and for what came out of this, that the future is knowledge-based, about talent, innovation, entrepreneurship, and place assets. And despite all the problems that Nigeria has had, if we're to move forward, then we must embrace knowledge and quality rather than quantity, and look out for the best practice models in other low and medium income countries, especially those that have transited to higher income. And that will be a great thing, because the Awolowo Foundation has the ability to partner with private sector and work with public sector to get things done. So on that note, I'd like to invite Professor Segun Gbadegesin, a retired professor of philosophy from the Howard University. Prof, you have 10 minutes. At about 8 minutes, I'll give you, I'll make a little sound so that you will know that you have 2 more minutes. Professor Gbadegesin.
Okay. Yeah. Can I share screen too, please?
You can. Yes, you can.
Okay, good.
You all have sharing rights. Thank you.
Good. Well, good evening over there in Nigeria. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be on the program. It's a good day. It's a blessed day. Today is the 66th anniversary of the first day of class for the first set of students of the Universal Free Primary Education Program in 1955. So we thank God for the vision that led to that. We thank God for the pioneers. And my assignment here is to look back with a view to looking forward. And I think what I want to start with first is that when we think about the inauguration of the free education system, free primary education system, we should not just focus on that aspect. We should focus on what was the mindset of Chief Obafemi Awolowo and his team going into public service. And we have to do that because what is lacking now is what they had. They had a deep sense, a deep understanding of humanity and society. And they wanted their intervention to do something about the condition of humanity. I'm not too sure that we can say that of many of the folks who are in public service now. But I leave that aside for now. Chief Obafemi Awolowo was, of course, the visionary. And in that vision of his, the emphasis is on human being as the sole dynamic in nature, a member of a family and of the state, having rights and obligations, and a consumer as well as an agent of production. Now, the question that occurred to them to ask was, what does this human being need to succeed as the sole dynamic in nature? And secondly, what do the family and society need to do to help him or her? And the answer simply is education, education, education. Because the success of a human being, according to Chief Obafemi Awolowo and the People's Republic, depends wholly on the degree of his health, his intellectual comprehension, and spiritual depth. This is because the coefficient of his efficiency in all undertakings generally, and of his productivity in any economic venture in particular, is education in every sense of the word. And by education, they mean the process of physical and mental culture, whereby a man's and a woman's personality is developed to the fullest. And that is the emphasis, full development. And education is that means to full development, as well as a means to national freedom. That was in a 1947 lecture by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. So why educate? Why do we educate? The answer, of course, is that human personality is fully developed through education, and a man or woman whose personality is so fully developed never fears anything, never cringes, never feels inferior, will resist any form of enslavement, is confident and courageous, and exercises freedom without endangering the freedom of others. Now, over the years, if we look back and if we follow this prescription, what we are experiencing now, ranging from all kinds of abnormalities in our system, we would not have experienced them. But we veered off from that mindset. We veered off completely from that trajectory. And what we are experiencing now is the result. Now, Chief Obafemi Awolowo also combined education and national freedom. In other words, education has something to do with national freedom. It's a means, number one, of attaining national freedom from the British government, and secondly, a means of benefiting from that freedom when it is finally obtained. So there's two visions in one. One, the moral vision that emphasizes man as the sole dynamic in nature. And second, the political vision to achieve the goal of national freedom from colonial masters. Education of citizens is key. And to maintain that freedom once obtained, education is also key. So the moral vision was the foundation of the political vision. Now, we may ask the question, why is the transition from education is important to education must be free? There are three arguments for that. One, the moral argument. If education is a good for everyone, then it's equally good for other individuals. If one individual deserves education, other individuals also deserve education. And where individuals cannot afford that good, then society is obligated to provide the means to achieve that good for everyone. There's a complete set of arguments for that in many of Chief Awolowo's writings. There is a pragmatic argument. If everybody must be educated, when the majority are uneducated, the few educated cannot live a normal life as educated people elsewhere do. We are experiencing that foresight. We are experiencing it now because we refuse to educate everyone. We know what we have been experiencing over the last couple of years, especially this past year. Development argument. The state stands to lose the potential contributions of the poorly uneducated to its development. Therefore, all hands must be on deck. And then the planning. What went into the planning? It was detailed, it was delicate. Positive contributions include a conducive political structure, strong and dedicated political leadership, and skilled and administrative leadership. The political structure, there was true federal structure, which allowed each region freedom in the matter of education. Then there was revenue allocation system that favored derivation. And we know how well managed the internal revenue generation effort was in the old Western region. Now, on political leadership, Chief Awolowo and his team were, of course, very well prepared. Each team member was well educated, a confirmation of the political argument of the vision. A survey of the needs of the program was done adequately. Teachers, number of teachers needed, classrooms needed, projected number of new students and their graduation rates, feeder institutions, secondary modern schools, additional secondary schools, trade schools, additional teacher training colleges. And of course, the action group was a mass party which mobilized the people for policy ownership. The administrative leadership was excellent. The cadre was apolitical, was well educated, highly dedicated, with skills in analysis of needs and implementation of policies. So all these were indeed positive contributions that led to the success of the launching of the program and its sustenance over the years.
2 minutes.
Of course, there was opposition, as we know. Partisan politics, which was the worst of its kind, but of course, action groups stuck to its program and the timeline. Now, in terms of sustenance, impact of political development post-1966 affected it, unitarization and centralization, military revenue system, which dumped derivation in favor of all kinds of things, post-military civilian culpability in education decline, and of course, misplaced priorities. How do we reclaim the vision of 1955? Do that by striving for and achieving a true federal structure, directing resources to the benefit of education sector, inspiring the private sector to contribute to public education, and encouraging shared responsibility between families and communities on the one hand and the state on the other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I will, for that very interesting lecture, talking about the vision of Chief Awolowo. And he said the education were two things. He had both a moral and a political vision. One building the person, and the other one seeing that education was a means of attaining national freedom, was a key for development as well. And that education should be free was also moral, pragmatic, and developmental. If it's good for one, it's good for all. And pragmatic, you cannot enjoy life when most of the people around you are disenfranchised, have not been educated. And a country with undeveloped people will not develop. So I want to thank you very much, sir, for this, and I will at this time invite Professor Banji Oyeyinka, who is a professor of African American and African Studies at the University of California, Davis, USA. Prof, you have 10 minutes. I will remind you 2 minutes to the time.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you, colleagues on this panel. Thank you, Dr. Jokumbo Awolowo Odosunmu, for inviting me. I hope you can all hear me.
Very well, very well.
Yes, very well.
Yeah, just to say that I live in Abidjan. I'm with the Africa Development Bank as Senior Special Advisor to the President of the Africa Development Bank. I'm very far away from California. I like to focus. Hello, can you hear?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
We can hear you,
good.
yes.
All right. So I like to focus on I want to thank the last two speakers. I think they've laid a very good ground for what we are going to discuss. My emphasis is going to be on the developmental part of Chief Awolowo's vision. As Eddie Fletcher said, education is our greatest opportunity to give an irrevocable gift to the next generation. Therefore, education exerts very powerful and long-lasting generational impact on society. The predetermined conditions of an individual very early in their lives, especially those determined by the material conditions of their parents, especially poverty, constitute a drag on their progress and tend to reduce their chances of opportunities of success in life, including the impairment of basic rights and freedom. And I'd like to say that when you look at the vision of Chief Awolowo, I mean, he actually foresaw what most of the international organizations came up with years after, that education is a right. Now, what I want to do is to just summarize basically my outline, what I have here because of time. The first thing is to look at the impact of COVID. COVID has exacerbated the widening opportunity divide between the wealthiest and the poorest together, with the increasing difficulty in attaining the income convergence that we also foresaw in the early 60s when we got independence. Many countries in Africa had hoped that over time, over the next 50 years, we should achieve some level of income convergence with those who have gone ahead of us. Of course, it hasn't happened, and we've seemed to have fallen further behind. And symptomatic of this, actually, is the state of education, which has been really vividly painted by the last two speakers. According to UNESCO, the COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of the educational system in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and on continent. The closure of schools, all learning spaces, 94% actually of world student population, up to 99% in low and lower middle income countries have been affected. So the crisis, as we've seen, is actually making worse pre-existing educational disparities. And that's the first point we need to know. Whenever you have income disparities, you begin to have widening, other existing conditions widening, by reducing opportunities for many of the vulnerable children, youth, adults, particularly those living in poor and rural areas, girls, refugees, persons, and of course, it also has a lot of impact on ethnicity and so forth. So the learning losses, as the former speakers have said, is going to extend beyond this generation and erase decades of progress, not least in support of girls and young women's education and retention in school. The estimate we have here is that close to 24 million additional children and youth from pre-primary to tertiary may drop out again in 2021 due to this pandemic. Now, what Chief Awolowo focused upon early in the vision was to ensure that everyone has a foundation. Because among the most lasting impact is that education system perpetuates and reproduces social inequalities. And I like to make a distinction between equity and equality. Equity is that the characteristics of being fair and impartial, and to sum it, to have a level playing field for everyone, irrespective of your background. That seems to have totally disappeared from our society. And when there is the law or the moral imperative that assures equity, you can achieve some level of equality in society. The widening inequities that we see here has led to huge inequalities in our society. The very foundation of this process is primary education. A primary school education is the foundation upon which other levels of education can be built. If a primary school education is lacking, that individual is starting life on a very, very rocky foundation. This is, I believe, the basis upon which Chief Awolowo went with his party, went ahead to enact the free education in 1955. Now, there are several dimensions of disparities, particularly what I call social equity and social inequalities. Education is one of the most key. It has a tendency to perpetuate and reproduce social inequalities because of its influence on income, as well as health, longevity of individuals. And therefore, the way and the level of education that someone has tend to determine how an individual spends their adult life. To that extent, ensuring a fair, in other words, equity, inclusive system which affords all the benefits of education is vital for an equitable society. Therefore, without quality basic education, the very foundation of educational process, an individual's life journey will be very rough. If you look at northern Nigeria today, and not surprising, the poorest area of our nation, over 11 million, some say 15 million children are out of school. And the same, you find a very strong correlation between illiteracy, poverty, disease, with a lack of education. Now, let me just end up with 4 basic channels by which this pandemic is transmitting inequalities. Number 1 is the digital divide, limited access to technologies, lack of access to radio, television, computers, internet, data left many students unable to engage in remote learning. Many don't even have electricity, not even lamps in some homes. They lack access to the internet, and which is becoming increasingly indispensable for education. Most students have no access to internet-enabled smartphones. Only a handful have access to mobile phones that can support basic texting functionalities. In some homes, you find surveys that have been carried out. Parents don't even have a computer. Lessons may be on video. The kids are not able to listen except on audio.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. The second channel is intergenerational educational inequality. When the parents, especially the mother, is not educated, it's very likely that these students will also suffer the same fate, and poverty will be transmitted intergenerationally. Number 3 is people living in rural areas. That is a problem. They are less likely to have resources to adapt to all of the issues that we listed earlier. Number 4, children, of course, living in extreme poverty. For many of you here, you may actually know some of the data we generated here at the bank. 50% of the poorest of the poor are projected to live in just 3 countries in 2030. Nigeria, DRC, Congo, that's DR Congo, and Ethiopia. 50% if current growth continues. In other words, if we don't change course, and this includes rapidly educating our people, 50% of all the world's poorest people are going to be living in only 3 countries in Africa. In conclusion, fiscal pressures have increased. Financing of education will face major challenge because most of our leaders don't even appreciate it. Exacerbating massive pre-COVID education funding gaps. On the other hand, the crisis has stimulated wide-ranging innovation within the educational sector. We have seen innovative approaches in support of education and training continuity, from radio to television to take-home packages. But we need to invest to ensure that our children have access to it. I close with Chief Awolowo's quote. He said, in order to attain to the goals of economic freedom and prosperity, Nigeria must do certain things as a matter of urgency and priority. It must provide free education at all levels and free health facilities for the masses of its citizens. What he said 66 years ago might as well have been said yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Just as a recap, Prof has told us that COVID has widened the education divide, and that the primaries, and he also mentioned that primary school is the most important and it's foundational, and that education tends to perpetuate, or lack of education tends to perpetuate, social inequalities. And one of the ways that COVID has worsened this divide are four things: the digital divide, the lack of access to technology, the intergenerational inequality. So if you have mothers who are illiterate, it's likely that their children will be. The rural-urban divide, because they have no resources. And children in poverty in places with burgeoning populations in such a way that Nigeria will be one of the last 3 countries to have children out of poverty. 50% will have 50% of the children still in poverty. That's Nigeria, DRC, and Ethiopia. And which means if we do not change the way we approach education, we're going to be in dire straits. So I want to thank you, Prof, and I will now be moving to the people who are in charge of education in Nigeria. And I will, at this time, want to invite the Commissioner for Education in Lagos State, Mrs. Shade Adefisayo. 10 minutes I'll give, and I'll remind you 2 minutes to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Dr. Aolo Dosunmu. I am honored that you have asked me to speak at this event, for I'm a great follower of your late father, and I consider that anything I do today, even as a Commissioner for Education, I would always think about what would Baba Awolowo do. Of course, I dare not say I'm near him in any way, but I do know that I put him before me always. And so I'm supposed to talk about policy thrusts and practical experience. I'm not going to use a paper because I want to make this absolutely conversational, because it's really a conversation. I will start with the practical and move to the policy thrusts. I've heard what all the professors before me said. I thank you very much. It's really an honor to sit in the same panel with such brain power, and I have certainly taken a lot from what you have said. Before the pandemic, we must acknowledge, unless we want to deceive ourselves, the poor state of public schools, the poor state of education, let me put it, for vulnerable and poor children in the state. And before then, when we came in 2019, September, we're very excited at the possibility that, look, here it is, it's in our hands. So we developed plans focusing on 15 key drivers of transformation that we would key into. The budget came out for education. Education was given a significant boost in its budget, and then the epidemic struck. Now, Lagos is an interesting place. Unlike the rest of the country, there are actually more private schools and there are more children in private schools. It's reckoned, there are many studies, but I think the statistics range from 65 to 72% of children being in private schools. But what kind of private schools? And so while we have 1,700 roughly public primary, junior, and SS schools, we have 18,000 private schools. And of these, it is reckoned that at least 80 to 85% of the children are actually in low-cost schools with similar demographics to the public schools. The reasons for this are not far-fetched. There's been loss of confidence in public education, and we just don't have enough public schools in Lagos. With 1,016 primary schools, for example, we can tell with the population of about 20 million that this is wholly inadequate. So we had a lot of plans for all these. What I'm going to talk about now, whatever I say now, will concern the children, the 80% of the children in low-cost schools and children in public schools. Like I said, there's similar demographics, they face a similar situation. Because before the pandemic and when it was about to strike, the 20% or 15% were saying things like, oh, we have online, our children would just move school online, everything will be fine. But we knew that we had not invested sufficiently in online solutions and that the children would therefore suffer increasingly during a lockdown. Some people felt the lockdown would be for a short period, so just treat it like a holiday, and when they come back, they'll go back to learning. Luckily, in the Ministry of Education, we did not share that opinion at all. we started to think, how will we ensure that majority of the children keep learning? And that was where we went to the lowest form of technology, the radio, because this showed, many studies too had shown that this was the most accessible to poorer children. But again, we found out that many poor children do not have radios. So we actually had to have a drive, a serious drive for people to donate radios. And we delivered these to most vulnerable children in hard to reach places. You know, in Lagos, we do have a lot of inaccessible terrain. So we deliver these radios there. And we worked with partners as well. We worked with a lot of partners to deliver classes on radio and television. I'm glad to say a lot of them donated their airtime free, and we held classes till December. In fact, we are still meeting now to resuscitate the classes again. But all the same, despite all this, there were still many children who were not accessing learning. And we knew, of course, that radio and TV, by their very nature, are not intuitive. They are not, you can't access that learning is taking place. They are not online. They are not real-time. And so we tried to go into real-time solutions. We partnered with a group again, and we had online solutions. Again, no data, no devices. Many of our students, most of these students had no access whatsoever to any device to be able to get to the internet. They had no data. They would use their father. Even their fathers did not use featured phones. So they had no access. So again, we went on a serious drive, and we were able to get many organizations to help us, sponsor us, and we're able to give the terminal, most of the students in terminal classes, computers. We gave them website, loaded our curriculum, and we're able to do a bit of teaching and learning. But the reality was actually that most of these children were not learning. The reality was that they were not staying indoors. The children in this vulnerable group are sometimes working children, house helps, vulcanizers, and so on. So they were on the streets. In fact, there was a trip I took to Ikorodu to look at schools, and I found somebody who put loudspeakers on the street, and they were dancing. There were hundreds of children there just dancing because I guess boredom and so on had set in. So the reality was that they were not staying indoors, they were not learning indoors, they were working. Their family needed them to make an income. So by the time students resumed in September, frankly speaking, I know we did radio, I know we did all this, but frankly speaking, there was a severe learning slide. A lot of children didn't come back. A large cohort, and this will have immense consequences, as we've learned, because when we start building up a large cohort of out-of-school children, you can imagine what that will do for social cohesion. There was widening inequity, as the professor before me said, sheer unfairness. So many children learned nothing, and so many didn't come back. And then there was a very serious factor that we hadn't thought of during when children were at home, when parents said, well, he hasn't been to school for 6 months, so that means school is not that important. And so the children had started learning trades, which is fine. But it's best, like we all know, to learn these trades in a more formal environment. You should still go to school and learn trades. And therefore, we've got to make school consequential, important, and a place where children can learn at their own pace and not treat the learning of trades as that for children who are not clever. There are children who are very clever in using their hands, and children who are very clever in using other parts of their anatomy. And so we've got to understand this. But you see, what happened was these children just didn't come back. And they, of course, suffered from increasing poverty, mental problems, sexual harassment, and so on. The teachers too lapsed. We did a lot of online training during this period for our teachers. We had them doing, we taught them how to use the computer, how to present online, how to teach online. And so we kept on training them, but we knew that there was a slide with them as well. And then, of course, at the end, you can imagine the impact on the students. So by the time they came back, teachers were counselors, teachers were giving them food. Some couldn't even come because they hadn't eaten in days. They had no uniforms, and we had to have another drive again to bring children back in September.
2 minutes.
I'm almost done. So what are the lessons that we've learned? Number one is, for vulnerable children, school is actually a safer environment than home. At least in school, they keep social distance, they learn the protocols, and they are learning as well. Second, technology is a major driver of how we are going to solve this problem. I'm not sure this pandemic is going anytime soon. I'm not very positive about our ability to get enough vaccinations. And so I'm very worried and feel that it's still possible that we will still have to go online at a point, in which case we must invest in technology. Luckily, the state has increased the budget for education significantly. And out of this, we are ourselves going to buy devices for our students. We are passing, at the moment, the state is laying cables across the state, and the last mile of those cables will go into schools and hospitals. So at least we are certain that in school, at least, there will be access to the internet. We'll keep on improving teaching deliberately. We've done a lot with our curriculum and schemes of work. We've integrated the normal, what we call the core skills, the 21st century skills of teamwork and collaboration, creativity, innovation, problem solving, student personal leadership, and so on. So we've changed the look of our curriculum, and we are going to start implementing this term. Very excited about that. We did it with a whole cohort, hundreds of people working with us, individuals, schools, universities, and so on. And I think what we've come up with is a good piece of work, and we look forward to somebody to evaluate the quality for us. We want to address the relevance of education. We saw the social cohesion after the COVID. Part of it is the lack of skills, because if you don't go to school, then you must have if you don't go to university, you must have an alternative. You must have something that gives you skills that will enable you be a productive member of society. So we are working on our vocational schools, building more vocational schools, and deliberately investing in what we are trying to call comprehensive schools. Again, we're excited about that by September, we'll have schools where, look, you have an option, go for academics or go for vocational. And if you decide to do both, it will be possible. I remember the good old comprehensive high school, Ayetoru, had such a model, and we are going to dredge up that model, and we plan to implement by September. Again, we want to, there are many broader issues that I've not addressed, like the governance of education, the federalism in our country, and so on, because I think the professor spoke well before me. I think it's quite clear that lessons have been learned, and we really have to deliberately now, as a state and as a people, invest in education as the major driver of this country's prosperity in the future. And of course, we have to broaden our network of partners. We already work with banks, with television stations, with individuals, even from across the world. Like when we were doing our history curriculum, people from across, Nigerians in the diaspora, everybody had their own ideas about how we should teach history and how we should integrate it in our curriculum. And it was a great session. And then we had great Zoom sessions where people were contributing ideas. So all in all, what I see, and I'm ending now, is that we must deliberately take these lessons. In Lagos State, we have decided to take the lessons that we've learned and continue on this, drive to improve education. That's why the budget has gone up deliberately. It was about 10, 11 to less than 12%. It's over 12% now. But don't forget that we have to rebuild Lagos. And with this budget, we will improve infrastructure, we will invest in technology, we will build more schools, and we will invest in our teachers and our students. It's a promise that we've made. And I hope in a year's time, I can come back and tell you if we did this or not. COVID or not, lockdown or not, we've just got to stay focused on what we want to do. Thank you once again, Ma, for allowing me to come to this platform. And like I said, I was not speaking for the private, the top grade private schools in Lagos. You have Dr. Umsira, who's perfectly competent to speak about their experience during this period. But I'm talking for the vulnerable children, the poorer children, disadvantaged children, girls from poor homes who faced a really daunting experience, and what we thought about and what we thought we could do for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olufisayo.
Thank you for the doctorate, but no, I'm Mrs. Adefisayo.
Mrs. Adefisayo, okay. Thank you very much. I will just quickly do a recap as we move on. That in Lagos State, 65 to 75% of children are in private schools, although the quality of the private schools, in about 80% of those are probably more like public schools, and that during the COVID, a lot of lessons were learned. And one of them was that for vulnerable children, school is safer than home. And that two, they have learned that we must invest in technology, whether we like it or not. They have increased the budget. Lagos State has increased the budget for education, has laid cables to schools, has invested in devices for students, has trained their teachers, have changed their curriculum to include soft skills, and are going to adopt the model of comprehensive schools so that vocational skills, being well taught in vocational skills, will be an alternative. I want to thank you very much. And at this point, I'm going to invite the Honorable Commissioner for Education, Barrister Olasukomi Olaleye, the Honorable Commissioner for Health, for Education, Science and Technology, Oyo State, to please give us a view of what's happened in Oyo State and where they're going. 10 minutes, sir. I will remind you, 2 minutes to the end.
Thank you, Madam. I thank Chief Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for the opportunity to speak on the effect of COVID-19 on our basic education and the policy trust of our government. I must say that COVID-19 caught especially in the area of basic education, and the effects are still is that the session was truncated. Then again, learning through interaction with teachers also became impossible last year. And so at the end of the day, we had to cancel the third term in Oyo State. However, within the period, we were able to introduce a number of things so that we can continue to learn even during the period of the crisis. The first thing we noticed, especially in the area of basic, we were able to do a bit better as regards the secondary schools and the tertiary institutions. But for the basic education, the first thing we discovered was that we did not have content in audio or video forms to teach our students, and we had to start recording immediately, and that was almost about 2 months after we've closed schools. We started to record audio and video in area of English language, mathematics, and basic technology. Now, after we've successfully done that, then the next problem we faced was distribution of these contents. We introduced school on air, like Lagos State government did. Also, as at that time, we've been able to develop our websites, which we call the Educational Management Information System. And we're able to deploy this content on the website. But also, we quickly discovered that not all the students could access the website, either because the parents don't have smartphones, or because they don't even have reception in their localities. We have 2,445 public primary schools and about 3,000 private primary schools in Oyo State. So we discovered that most of them couldn't access the content we deployed because of the lack of internet and the radio or the smartphone to hard to reach areas. Of course, we received some support from UNICEF and also from internet providers that give our students 500 MB free to use to go on our website and use some of the content we deploy there. However, it was not all problems all the same. Within the period, we developed what we call Education and Emergency Response Plan for both the primary schools and the secondary schools, even the tertiary institution as well. And that has been the basic and the basis of the plans on how to tackle these kind of problems in the future. So we started working on this, and we believe that from what we've gained and the lesson we learned, and with the resources the government in the states has deployed, I think we'll be able to reach most of the students in Oyo State. And not only that, presently, I think was it in December? Yes, in December, the government of Oyo State has released a huge sum of money for us to develop what we call education emergency management system. Now we are already developing what I call this thing. The e-learning platform to take care of both the primary and the secondary schools in Oyo State. So largely, I want to say that although we started poorly, but over time we've been able to, over a period of time, we've been able to improve in reaching out to our basic school students in the States. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Excuse me. It's a cut off. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. Everything has come. Okay, madam. So, in conclusion, with the budget provisions for in the states and the training of teachers, which is ongoing at the moment, and the support we are receiving from donor agencies, I think we've been able to face the problems and be able to do better than where we started, and also the basic education will receive the support and able to grow better than we made it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barisa. You actually have kept to time. And from what you have said, Oyo State was doing better, found that that the secondary and tertiary levels were better, but that there were some major challenges to dealing with the primary schools in this COVID era, because you found that you had no content in audio and video form, which you have been able to move forward. You also were trying out training on radio. You had school on air, like Lagos State, and you also set up a website. The budget has been improved and training is ongoing for your teachers presently, and you're having support from for donor agencies and other friends. We wish you the very best. And at this time, I will like to call on Mrs. Ronke Shoyombo, the Special Advisor on Education, Ogun State. Good evening, madam. 10 minutes. I will remind you 2 minutes to the end. Do you want to share a screen, or you're just going to talk? Hello? Hello.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, to Chief. Hello, madam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just thanking everybody tonight for for inviting me for this very important event. And quickly, with what we have done in Ogun State, without wasting much of your time, Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
We can
Sorry,
hear you.
the network is really, really bad, so please forgive me for this tonight. What we're talking about is looking at all the challenges, the risk of falling further behind and becoming isolated with school doors closed. So there's no doubt about it. And with that, what Ogun State did was to actually, sorry, I'm trying to go inside. So we had to look for strategies. And the first thing we did was to ensure continuity of the academic learning of students. And that's why we created the DigiClass, because we were the first state to start with virtual learning in Nigeria. And with that, we were able to actually capture quite a lot. But when we realized that we were not actually capturing more than 35% of our children, we had to introduce radio, we had to go on TV, on websites. And another thing that we did was to ensure distribution of food to homes where children were seriously in need. Ensuring well-being of students, training nurses and COVID-19 champions for schools, because when we were about starting, there was no way we could start without having isolation rooms. There was no way we could start without having trained nurses. And when we didn't have enough nurses, some science teachers had to step in to become COVID-19 champions, and they were really trained. Now, another thing was to ensure provision of other social services to students. Supporting education of students with special needs, as I said, addressing emotional needs of students, and supporting students with parents that have limited command of language. I mean, with that, we've realized that children from illiterate homes, we needed to raise the profile of mass education, Agency for Mass Education, where we can actually teach our parents basic maths and literacy, and those are the kind of things that we have started in Ogun State. So for the policy trust perspective, you will see that we started with a low-cost innovative assessment model. And with that, we were getting about 185,000 children averagely daily. And that's to look at the people, the people going to our platforms, the people going on radio, on TV. But we needed to also be very inclusive. So we invited teachers from special needs schools so that children from special needs schools also can be catered for. Now, how did we actually do advocacy? Just like the Commissioner for Education in Lagos State talked about, we had to actually do a lot with our parents, because some parents were joining themselves together. Some parents were paying for maybe diesel on Monday. This one will pay for Tuesday. So people were working together. And we had to use the village heads and traditional leaders to be able to access some of the children in the rural areas, because we struggled a lot with that. And how do you know that every child is accessing? So what we did was to just take SS3 students, and with that, with the SS3 students, we were able to do mock WAEC. And with that, you will see the figure of the children that sat for it. From other states was 809, but from Ogun State was 16,566, which really, really impressed us that at least children are accessing us. And this was done on a Saturday. Now, another thing is, as a state, we had to actually onboard all our teachers, because this is a time where we are in the digital time that what worked before COVID-19 unfortunately cannot work after COVID-19. So all the 27,000 plus teachers were onboarded. You can see that the secondary school teachers are being grouped based on their subject of specialization for collaboration and sharing of best practices. I was so amazed because the Yoruba teachers started before everybody. They started sharing lesson plans, they started sharing resources, they started sharing good sites. And to me, that has really, really given us a very, very good comfort in Ogun State. And the primary school teachers, we did the same thing. We are yet to finish with all the students, but we only did it with the SS3 students in Ogun State. Now, for us to provide equitable and inclusive access to learning conditions, we use the COVID-19 time, the 6 months, productively, because that's when we were able to start with 952 schools that are currently being renovated in all the 236 wards of Ogun State. Now, isolation rooms were set, social distancing, so we put all these things in place to support our students. Another thing is teacher training was a vital thing for us that we have started with. We've started with our school leaders. And also we're now also accessing our teachers more as well. And you can see that when Federal gave us 52 pages of COVID-19 risk assessment form, what we did was to actually set it up on our website so that private school owners, about 17,000 private schools in Ogun State, and also the 2,000 plus public schools, they were able to access us online. And at the moment, the Computer Teachers Association of Nigeria, what we've done is to train them to see how they can start cascading that down to all teachers. Something very wonderful that we did was to actually train all the school leaders. And that's why I have to give kudos to my no, because there has to be a vision of the leader, really, and his vision is ICT. So that really helped. All hands are on deck, then they're ready to follow. Now, the way forward is supporting the free education vision from us in Ogun State is all stakeholders, government, NGOs, civil society. We should 6 months, hopefully, to provide equitable and inclusive access to digital learning resources. Now, we need the support of our internet providers and media participation in ensuring quality education. Another thing is parental engagement has got to be more thorough. Continuity of limited physical education service for the most vulnerable children, distributing information and providing online resources in different languages. More than ever for accessible and qualitative. Thank you.
I know there has been a lot of internet challenge, and I will just quickly say that, yes, Ogun State, thank you very much. Just a quick recap. Ogun State, one of the major things, they also recognized the problems that COVID brought. They started the DG class and to support education, which was similar to the class on air. But they also supported their students with food to students. But some of the things that they learned was that it was important to involve the parents in working with government to ensure that education was sustainable and was used. They used their local. They also worked with the traditional leaders. And they found that it was important for the telcos and internet providers to work with governments so as to provide education to the most vulnerable. Teacher training was also a major focus of what they did. So I'm sorry I cannot totally recap, but those are the main points. We will now move on to the private educators coping with the pandemic. And I'll be inviting Dr. Mrs. Femi Ogunsoya, the CEO of Oxbridge Tutorial School, who was a former microbiologist, which I just found out. 10 minutes, ma.
Right. Thank you very much indeed for the introduction, Shade. Thank you, Dr. Awolowo Odosunmu, for inviting me to be among such learned people who are such eloquent speakers. And it's been very interesting, the different submissions from America, from people in the diaspora, as well as the commissioners for education, and the special assistant to the Ogun State governor on education. It's been really, really interesting and eye-opening. I'm going to, a lot of the things I might have said might have been said already, but I'm going to focus more on the private education sector. As a preamble, before COVID-19, about 10.5 million Nigerian children aged between 5 and 14 were out of school. Only 61% of 6 to 11-year-olds regularly attended primary school. Nigeria contributes approximately 20% of the total global out-of-school population. That's before COVID-19 even hit us. So there were already challenges in our education sector, in our education space, as have been enumerated by the professors who gave the initial talks. Next slide, please. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as the professor who spoke from, I think Kenya it was, Professor Oye, I can't remember, sorry. It was the greatest disruption to education. And of course, there are accompanying realities for each and every one of us, including those of us in private sector, was confusion, panic, fear, that feeling of uncertainty, that hollowness in one's tummy. How does one cope with this? It's something we've never experienced, except anybody who's about 100 years old, because the last time it happened was in 1918. So about 1.5 million children dropped out of school as a result of the pandemic and due to the COVID-19. So was Nigeria ready to address or even cope? Obviously, the question was, the response is no. We were caught napping in Nigeria. But it's been an eye-opener, as has been enumerated before me. A lot of lessons have been learned. Were private schools ready? That's $1 million question. Because yes, we've been dancing around technology, but we hadn't actually focused nor settled down to it to actually see and appreciate the importance of technology in education. Next slide, please. So in Nigeria, as the Commissioner for Education, the Commissioners of Education have said, there are different categories of private schools. We have the mission schools, that is the Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic. The new generation churches also have schools, the Muslims have schools. Then we have the international schools. We have language schools, French-speaking Italian schools. We have a lot of owner schools. And then, of course, we have the low-fee paying schools. And the Commissioner for Education, Lagos State, has spoken about low-fee paying schools, that is the low-income schools, are very similar, broadly, to the state schools. 80,000 privates, there are about 80,000 private secondary schools in Nigeria. And as Commissioner for Education in Lagos State said, about 18,575 in Lagos alone. And this constitutes about 75 to 80% of schools. 33% of the children are enrolled in private schools. So you can see that the private schools are taking care of a small proportion of those children who have age-going schools in Nigeria generally. Now, the immediate strategies that we pivoted to when the COVID-19 first started, when it was announced abroad, when it was declared a pandemic in February 2020, we were wondering if it would ever get to Nigeria. But having learned from the experience of Ebola, some private schools immediately put in place task forces to start preparing, to start strategizing, to start deliberating on what we will do if it ever hits Nigeria. And lo and behold, by March, it was in Nigeria. Sorry, late February, it was in Nigeria. And by the 23rd of March, the declaration of schools closure came about to each and every one of us as a surprise, as not actually knowing what was going on. But we knew we had to immediately pivot to technology and go online. And I must give it to the Nigerian teachers. I always doff my hat when we talk about pivoting to technology, to online classes in the private sector. The teachers put in all they had. Yes, there was a lot of training done But we now notice the level of creativity. Nigerians are clever. We are brilliant if given the opportunity. So we pivoted to technology, but it's very expensive because, of course, schools had to acquire various resources, additional desktops or laptops, tablets, mobile phones, radios, all kinds of gadgets needed to be acquired in order to be able to have meaningful teaching and learning online, because it's very different from the classroom. So, of course, timetables had to be reviewed, had to be restructured. In my school, for example, we had physical classes at 1.5 hours. We had to reduce them to 50 minutes so that to be able to keep the students engaged. But one of the greatest challenges we had was data. Data is very expensive in Nigeria, and I'm very happy the person speaking after me is from MTN. It's very, very expensive. It's very unfriendly, the level of commitment and investment that schools had to make in data. Then, of course, there are challenges of electricity, both in schools and at home for the children, and which increased the level of expenditure because we had to also depend a lot on generators and use diesel. So a lot of these needed to be acquired immediately. What we did with data, for example, with our teachers, we had to give them additional funds to be able to acquire data so that they could work from home and have access to data. And what some of them did, or what we advised them to do, was that if you have challenges with electricity, just load your phone and use the hotspot on your phone. So there were a lot of investments on delivery platforms, Zoom, EdTech, Google Classrooms, Edmodo, Kahoot, Prezi, WhatsApp, a lot of investment. Schools immediately, I would say that our experiences are quite equivalent to the private schools abroad. The private schools in Nigeria rose up to the occasion despite all the challenges and did the needful. Then, like the Commissioner for Education for Lagos State said, there was a lot of staff training. In some schools, the staff training had started once the COVID-19 was identified in China. Immediately, we started training just in case we had to, we would suffer school closures and teachers would need to go back to go online to deliver and to teach. So there was a lot of training, how to use Google Classroom, how to use Zoom, a lot of training. And from all of this, we have actually enjoyed some benefits that are here to stay with us in our private education sector. We observe creativity in both teachers and learners, the creativity of the learners in particular, because they are taking their children, they are born into that generation, and they now had the opportunity to actually show. And this was very, very comforting to observe. It made one very happy and very fulfilling for the children. The online classes also allow self-paced learning, that the children can pace themselves when they're learning remotely at home. They can improve self-discipline because every child is then encouraged to develop some timetable. So, a lot of skills were also learned with this. They improve their research skills and independent learning because they could then go to any platform to find out information about any topics that they needed to address. Easier access to online resources. And we just found out that the world is one small global village because we could then access resources, human, technology, from anywhere in the world. And as we speak now, a lot of private schools still have online classes. They have running parallel online classes, so they have that separate, and they have the physical classes as well. And the online classes, they have students from all over the world, and they also have access to teachers from all over the world. So it has really opened up the educational sector for the private sector in Nigeria. Next slide, please. Other benefits that we have noticed is that it improves much needed IT skills for the students. So, and teachers, even non-teaching staff, my teachers, non-teaching staff, for example, all the PAs in my school had to learn how to set up Zoom meetings all of the things that we hadn't used before. They now have the opportunity and they're using them freely. More opportunities for teacher-student interaction, because now teachers can Zoom sessions on Saturdays. They can arrange Zoom sessions all through the week at any point in time to have additional support for the students' lessons. Gain greater access to experts in their fields. I have mentioned that. Create ability to concentrate and stay focused, and improve communication skills. So students are able to communicate better, teachers are communicating. So it's just opened up a whole lot of skills that we have seen as benefits. And it just goes to show that our children are intelligent, our teachers are creative, and they can compete with their peers all over the world. So they are now part of the global community. Next slide, please.
1 minute more.
But of course, there are challenges, yes. Very quickly, finance for schools, teachers, and parents, because there was a lot of challenge for schools. With the close down, parents didn't want to pay fees because term was not declared, and that depleted the income for the schools. We know income for schools is about 80% for salaries, so that affected a lot of, created a lot of challenges. Migration of staff, some staff moved to other places. Screen time for students became a challenge because students were spending more time and therefore utilizing more data. Loss of social interactions. That's one key challenge that we noticed even after the students resumed. There were behavioral challenges. They were shy, they were reluctant, they were not interacting as much as they should. Despite the fact that collaboration is one of the key skills they need. Learning losses and gaps, up to about 30% in developed countries, so we can imagine Nigeria. Students' engagement, more stressful for teachers. Students get up to all kinds of pranks behind the screen. They can put up all kinds of images, and teachers have to be alert all the time to keep monitoring what's going on. Syllabus coverage is a challenge. Mental awareness of all stakeholders, most especially the teachers and the students. So those are the challenges that are faced as a result, as well as cyber bullying. Cyberbullying is one of the key challenges that children are exposed to now. And we have to keep doing trainings and explaining to them how to therefore protect themselves from sexual harassment, all kinds of. So the online classes have also opened up those challenges. Uncertainties that accompany school parents' responses. We had a lot and lots of issues. The commissioner can attest to that. Lots of revenue, effect on payment of salaries, and impact on families. Some schools have actually shut down. And what happens to the children in those areas that the schools have now shut down? So the next slide, please. So very quickly, just to round up. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for having me on this platform. It's been a rushed presentation, but I hope I've been able to make some sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Busoya. What has come through is that despite the fact that private schools could rise quickly to the challenge, forming task forces, acquiring resources, they still had challenges with data, and there were challenges with loss of income, and some schools have had to shut down, but there were benefits. There has been increased creativity in teachers and learners. There was also the ability for self-paced learning, and it has been seen that some of the students have improved in discipline. There was easier access to online resources, including personnel, so that access to teachers internationally as well. And it has also improved research skills. However, the one thing that came through was the learning gaps that has been found in developed countries, which we have not yet measured, but which has been alluded to by all the speakers, and also the loss of social interaction, meaning interaction online does not make replace human contact, which has also affected mental wellness, and there has been a lot of stress amongst teachers. Thank you very, very much. At this point, we will now speak to we will hear from Ms. Omotayo George, who is the Senior Manager Youth Segment of the MTN, who will give us the perspective in terms of connectivity and future strategic partnerships that we will be expecting between the internet providers and the education sector. Ms. George, please, 10 minutes.
Good evening. Can you hear me, please? Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you. I would like to share my screen, if it's okay.
When it's 2 minutes to the end, I will alert.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much to Dr. Awolowo Dosunmu for inviting me here. It's my pleasure to be here representing MTN at this very, very interesting conversation. But first of all, I think it's quite interesting that Dr. Ogunsoya referred to me, coming up, because I was Dr. Ogunsoya's student many years ago at Oxbridge. So I'd just like to say a special good evening to Dr. Ogunsoya. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So quickly, I will just get right into it. Now, everything we're talking about this evening really ties into MTN's vision. And what's our vision? To lead the delivery of a bold new digital world. It's driven by our core belief that everyone deserves the benefits of a modern, connected life. So we really thought about it, once COVID, kicked in last year, got to Nigeria, the lockdown happened, children were locked away at home, and from all the presentations, we can see that over 70% of students in Nigeria are in public schools, so immediately, it became obvious that we were going to have a huge problem on our hands if we didn't, pitch in. So how were we really going to make sure that students in public schools also got the benefits of a modern, connected life? So let me just move quickly. What are some of the impacts that we noticed? Of course, it's been said over and over again tonight. Lack of e-learning infrastructure, in public schools. Affordability of devices, also further worsened by the exchange rates. We know that devices are now really expensive. And then there's the issue of affordability of internet connectivity for online learning. I'm going to go quickly to our response. What did we do at MTN? I just summarized into 3 key things that we did. We have an online learning resource where we aggregate relevant content for 9 to 15-year-olds. We focus mainly on primary and secondary school students. So we did a lot on that platform last year. I'll talk to it in subsequent slides. And then we did something around giving out free data. I'll talk to that as I move forward. We had a lot of partnerships. We partnered with state governments. We partnered with private organizations. And then we did something around our CSR. Now, the first thing we did was, I'm sorry about that. I hope you can still see my slide. So what was important for us was, the first thing that was important is, we're talking about this connectivity, affordability of internet. Early to mid last year, we launched this free 15 gig, no strings attached for everybody, all students in Nigeria. We gave this, it's still ongoing at the moment, where we give 15 gig data for e-learning. That 15 gig data comes as 500 MB data daily. It's completely free to the students. As a matter of fact, we have over 1 million students who have signed up and are using this free data. Now, I was talking about our online learning platform. It's called Impulse. And Impulse has two sections. One section focuses on learning. Another section focuses on playing. So what we did last year was really focus very aggressively on the learning section. It wasn't a commercial venture for us last year. We were really, really focused on getting a lot of free resources aggregated onto that website. So we aggressively published more free learning resources, and over 80
We can't hear you.
I think she's...
Okay. We can't hear you anymore.
I think she's dropped off. Her internet has dropped her off.
Oh dear.
She'll join again. Okay, you're back.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I don't know where you lost me.
I think we lost you.
The network has no respect for anybody.
Yeah, okay.
Where you talked about the 5 megabytes for the children.
Okay. I'll just go back there. So I was saying that
I will give you maybe 1 extra minute. We're really behind time, so if you can.
I'm just going to brush through it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I was saying that we launched free 15 gig monthly for students all over the country, no strings attached. It's ongoing, still ongoing at the moment. And we have over 1 million students who are, currently using up that data, that free data every day. Another thing that we did, I don't know if, I will just talk through it. I said we have this online resource called Impulse. It's a website that is focused, where we focus on 2 key areas, learning and playing. But last year, once COVID hit, we focused more on the learning area. And so our goal, our drive was to really aggressively publish a lot of free learning resources, and competitions, things that could keep the students busy, they could participate in. We had, the syllabus content that was Nigerian syllabus specific was uploaded on the site. We also focus on soft skills. So we have over 1,000 videos, uploaded on this site as well. All this is completely free. We didn't do it as a commercial venture. We also really, it's a personal burden for me. Just even hearing everything that the professors and the speakers have spoken about tonight, it's a heavy burden. We don't want to widen the gap. We don't want to widen the digital divide. Another thing that we did to really encourage students to come onto this website, take up the free data offer, use the resources, was we launched a lot of competitions to really engage them, to keep them active. One of such that we did was a spelling bee competition, which we kicked off last year summer while the kids were on summer break because nobody was going anywhere. We kicked that off in Nigeria, and we've never done that before. We had over 16,000 students participating all over the country. So for us, it was a big success. We really encouraged the students as well. The first prize winner went home with 2 million naira. We also had a hackathon competition where we encouraged students all over the country to come up with solutions, to solve COVID-related problems in the country. So that's what we did with the free data and the MPulse website. In terms of partnerships, we had a lot of partnerships as well. The free 15 gig monthly that I spoke about, we also extended it to state governments. We partner with some state governments for their own state-related portals, education portals. We partner with private organizations. Students will go on all these sites, PassNG, Khan Academy, and use the free data, to access the content on those sites. Totally free, no strings attached. We did that last year, and it's still ongoing at the moment. We launched the MTN Education Suite. We partner with Google. We partner with Microsoft on Teams. Ordinarily, these things would cost schools to sign up, but we had a special arrangement with these organizations where the schools will come on board, partner with us, and it's discounted or completely free. We have packages that where we have devices, schools can come on board. We have device data, educational platform bundles, and then the schools can pay in installments for the devices. So we did all of that as well. And then as part of our ongoing CSR activity on foundation, we were still, on with our scholarships. We gave out 200,000 to so many students last year. We've given out almost 4,000 scholarships so far. We've given out 2.1 billion so far. And then we did other things. We supported, we have a scheme for blind students. We gave that out. We supported them last year as well. And this is on an ongoing basis. What's the next step for us? It's more partnerships. So I'm also using this opportunity to call out, I've heard so much. I'm really thankful that some of the states' education commissioners are online. I've heard the call for support, internet connectivity. We're looking for partnerships in the area of content, anything. Every little counts at this point, so we're open to partnerships. Please reach out to us at the email address. Thank you very much. I hope I've kept the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just I want to thank you for that and to say that this is an opportunity for the states to work with MTN. I'm sure some of them already are, but very exciting, the free learning resource via MPulse, which is about learning and playing, and also comes attached with it free data. And also in terms of their CSR, in terms of scholarships and ICT training. And I think one of the other parts of this is how they have been able to make children learn through competitions and play. And also the partnerships with government and private sector. Thank you for the opportunity. So we will move on now to hear from from the CEO of Ms. Betty Abba, the CEO of C Hope. She works to empower children through education. Now, I hope I'm saying the, sorry, hold on, please. Oh, sorry. I think I've said the wrong person. Professor Ngozi Osarere, a professor of educational foundation and counseling, a former commissioner of education in Edo State. Professor Osarere.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much, my DVC. And good evening I must particularly thank the Awolowo Foundation for inviting me to be part of this webinar. It's a very big privilege to be part of this. I'm supposed to be talking about the psychological impact of the lockdown on children. It is quite obvious that children are who they are, because when you look around, it was a lot of challenge, still a lot of challenge for parents, especially for the younger ones. They didn't understand, they didn't seem to understand the whole protocol of not running to hug anybody, of washing your hand regularly, and all that and all that. Apart from that, it's also a very big issue for our young ones trying to keep in touch with their friends, and that is not happening. Friends that they're used to playing with, friends they're used to interacting with, friends they always play with at school. And you remember we were not in school for a very long time. And even when school started, it was online schooling. And with online schooling, it's still not the same. It's the lockdown took away a lot of childhood experiences that ought to make a child become a fully functioning member of society. It took it away because children interact through play, children interact regularly in the classroom, and for them to be at home under supervision, under the prying eyes of parents and aunties and uncles and all that, it affected them so much, and it's still affecting some of them, because whether we want to accept it or not, the young people are particularly free spirits. They're not used to being caged. That they're not used to being put together. They're not used to being asked to stay one place. They're not used to being told that you have to do this. So because of that, it gives a serious issue of trying to cope. Coping is a problem, and that is why psychological social support is very key. Parents have to be more patient. Parents have to be more understanding, because the children become quite irritable. They become quite irritable, expecting certain things and not getting it, throwing tantrums and all that and all that. So is a very big psychological issue, and whether we want to accept it or not, with lockdown, it can never be the same again. It can't be the same again. It has created another angle to how we live our lives, especially for our young ones that are now being told, are made to understand that you are not supposed to play the way you used to play, because it has consequences. You are not supposed to run around. You are not supposed to. And children are not particularly used to being prim and proper. It's play. Play is what helps them to develop very well. And when they don't have that leverage, when they don't have that free movement, free interaction, even in the homes where they live, where they stay, they don't even move around the same way, because you have to put on your face mask, you have to wash your hand, you have to do this, you have to... All those restrictions become a problem for them. And it is only takes a lot of patience on the part of parents and other adults around to ensure that we help them to cope. And how do they cope? Because we have to help them to ensure that with each passing day of the lockdown, it becomes an issue. It becomes an issue. You have to make sure that all the things, all the protocols are taught, and not only teaching the protocols, you have to adhere to them. Is one thing to teach them, is another to adhere to the protocols. And not just that, to also ensure that they know the implications of going the other way. If you go the other way, it gets wrong. If you do this, it will be bad. And by so doing, it becomes a critical issue for us to ensure that for every child, the psychological well-being of that child should be paramount, should be a source of concern to us. And that is why even the schools that are doing online and virtual learning and teaching, they should also ensure that the counselors in the schools are encouraged to interface with these children to discuss some of the challenging psychological issues they are facing. How am I going to relate with my friend? How am I going to do this? How am I going to carry on? It becomes a fundamental issue, because if we don't focus, we are going to have dysfunctional children, and we don't want to have that. We don't want to have children that are not fully functioning members of society. And once you are not able to ensure that their psychological well-being, their emotional well-being are taken into consideration, then it becomes an issue. What else do I have to add? I have to add that as parents, as adults, we have to be very patient, very, very patient with the young ones. We have to be extremely patient, because they are not used to what they are seeing. They don't understand why I will not get up and go. And most times when you say don't do this, it becomes a serious issue. It becomes something that can flare up and generate a lot of energy and heat in the house. That why do you say I can't go and see my friends? What is wrong in my going to see my friend? What is wrong in my going outside to play? What is wrong in my going to do this? What is wrong in my going to do that? So in all of this, our focus will be one, the well-being of the child should be our concern. The psychological well-being, the emotional well-being, and the social well-being of the child should be our concern. And in so saying, and it's even good that we have people that have spoken who are education leaders in the states, Lagos State, Ogun State, or your state. Let them also please factor in the role of the counselor in trying to help is not enough for us to be teaching the children online. It's not just enough. You have to think of their psychological well-being. You have to prepare them. You have to pep them. And by so doing, you'll be getting what you want. And in doing that too, we'll be ensuring that our children become who we'll be proud of, who we are going to be very proud to showcase. Because lockdown has been a problem. It has been a very big problem. The psychological impact cannot be quantified. The anxiety it has generated for the young ones and for the adults, especially putting parents on edge on trying to ensure that their children are not shortchanged in any way. And in so doing, we'll make sure that our children are carried along. Be patient with them. I keep repeating, be patient with them, because the psychological impact is too severe. It creates anxiety for them. It creates disturbances for them. It gives them all kinds of disturbances. So we have to be patient, very patient, so that there won't be issues of discomfort. There won't be issues of throwing tantrums. There won't be issues of ensuring that our children become who we're very proud of. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm very proud that I'm part of this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I know that the time is short and everybody has a lot to say, but it's so that people can go back to sleep. Just a quick recap that the lockdown and online teaching has led to a lot of social isolation, and this may lead to children acting up and because they become stressed. And so it's important for schools as they plan for online teaching that they also think in terms of the psychological well-being and also empower and enable the school counselors to assist so that they can understand when children are not because it leads to a lot of social isolation. At this point, I'm going to invite Ms. Betty Abba. She's a journalist and the founder and CEO of See Hope, which is an NGO that takes care of vulnerable children. Ms. Abba.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can't see myself, but I can hear my voice.
Let me say you have 10 minutes.
Okay, all right.
We'll stop you at 10 minutes, please, because time is fast spent.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm the founder of See Hope. See Hope is a Center for Children's Health Education, Orientation and Protection. We work with vulnerable children in informal communities, in urban centers like Lagos, and also in rural communities. Because as we know, children are very vulnerable in a very complex society like ours. And then the COVID-19 situation has worsened their levels of vulnerability. Currently, Nigeria, like one of the earlier speakers mentioned, has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. And by World Bank rating, Nigeria is also the world poverty capital. So the indices are not favoring us. And at the end of the day, this boils down mostly to children. Children are the most impacted by these instabilities, by this negative turn of events. Though COVID-19 does not affect children as much as it does adults, but then at the end of the day, in terms of the economic impact, in terms of destabilization of the education, general stability, I think children suffer the most. And so I'll just share some of our experiences in See Hope. First of all, according to UNICEF, about 1.2 billion children are affected by school closures worldwide, and most of them in low-income countries like Nigeria. Also, because of the reality of the closures and they resort to online platforms, many schools have had to do distance learning, digital learning platforms, but only about 30% of children worldwide are able to effectively access this, like some of the speakers have mentioned earlier. And so in most of the communities where we work, in fact in all the communities where we work, these are the major challenges that children face. During the lockdown and much of the year, when schools were closed, many of them were practically out of school because either their parents do not have smartphones, they do not have television or radio to be able to access some of the lessons, or they have issues with electricity. So it was a major issue. It remains a major headache that we are battling with. And then the reality of COVID-19 has impacted on the economy of their parents. And so many of the children are exposed to hunger. I spoke to a young girl in one of the communities where we work a few days ago, and she told me she goes to school maybe once or twice a week because the mother, her mother is a single mother. She only goes to school when the mother is able to afford to give her money for transport and then for feeding. And there are so many, so she exemplifies millions and millions of Nigerian children who are faced with this reality. And this impacts on their education. Also, these children are exposed to domestic violence because sometimes their parents or guardian transfer the pressures on them. They're also vulnerable to sexual exploitation, to trafficking and other menaces as a result of these conditions, as a result of the impact of COVID-19. Of course, you are aware that we have little or no welfare structure and system in place in Nigeria, and most of the parents of these children are daily income earners. So because their business opportunities are shrinking, their family incomes are shrinking, it boils down directly on these children. So they are more and more exposed to more levels of vulnerability. And some of our intervention in recent times in trying to address some of these things is providing digital platform, ICT centers in communities. And so last year we were to put 6 ICT centers across 4 states in Nigeria, and 3 of them are orphanages. You know, when you talk about children being vulnerable, the level of vulnerability of orphan children is something completely different. And so in cognizance of this, we put 3 ICT centers in 3 orphanages across the Middle Belt, Benue, Plateau, and Kaduna. And these are predominantly children whose parents were victims of Boko Haram and herdsmen. And then 2 in Lagos, and 2 also in Lagos, and 2 in Benue, and then 2 in Lagos. So there are 6 of them. So it's a way of addressing this lack of access to digital access, and it's been successful so far. We are hoping that with more partnership, we'll be able to reach out to persons, to children, vulnerable children in marginalized, forgotten, and underserved communities, such as the ones where we work. And it's also very important that governments also collaborate with NGOs such as ours to be able to expand the scope of accessibility to digital platform for these vulnerable children. And something happened recently which I believe does not augur well for the education of these children who already are affected, who already are vulnerable. One of the communities where we saw the ICT centers, Monkey Village in Lagos, was demolished without prior notice by the Lagos State government, and the ICT center was destroyed. So that is a major setback for us. It's a major setback for the children. And when government does not take conscious effort to be able to preserve the stability of children in situations like this, the results are always very enormous. So right now, many of the children have been pushed into the street. Many of them have gone out. They're not going to resume when school resumes tomorrow. And then they've lost touch with this opportunity to be able to ensure they have digital access. So I believe it's something that the Lagos State government will want to look into and address, especially because Lagos has done a lot in ensuring that children have access to online learning, radio, TV, and all of that. I believe that this can be addressed. So thank you very much for having me. And I believe that with more stakeholders like you here on this platform today, focusing on the needs, the challenges faced by children, vulnerable children across Nigeria, especially in terms of educational access, in a very challenging period like this, that a lot to be achieved. And then our children will be better off. Our children will be prepared, equipped for the challenges of the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abba. Ms. Abba has given us a view from the other side. To those, her work means she works with vulnerable children, and we heard about the impact of COVID plus Boko Haram or herdsmen on children in the Middle Belt. And that orphans are, when we talk of vulnerable, orphans are one of the most vulnerable. And that the vulnerable children that are out of school, they have no access to technology, that they also have problems that are based on the economic impact in terms of hunger, inability to get to school, even if they're not hungry, from transportation because parents have lost their jobs. And that because of the stress of this, children are also more open, are more prone to being abused. And that it is important that as we plan, we're thinking, we must plan with these children in mind. So at this stage, we will be getting some goodwill messages from our elders. I have with us 4 of our elders, and they will give us 5 minutes goodwill messages and I'm sure we will get some important nuggets of wisdom from them. The first person is a patron of the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, His Royal Highness Igwe Emeka Achebe, the Obi of Onitsha, who will give us 5 minutes of his time. Thank you, sir. Your Highness.
Thank you very much, the coordinator, and greetings to everybody on this webinar. First of all, I commend the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for organizing this webinar at this time. It's a memorial to the establishment of free education. I was still in primary school, just about to go into secondary school, so I can look back and see the impact of free education. There was skepticism, even by other regional governors and premiers, but eventually everybody came on board because the dream was real. For simple, they foresaw that education is a major building block for human development, human capacity development, and ultimately economic development. A lot has been said. I was at this platform earlier on. I had to withdraw to go to another meeting to discuss on my community's response to COVID-19, because I have a community response program that involves all my people all over the world using Zoom and other things and so on and so forth. I think the point I want to make very simply is that, and we know that the population of the youth of this country, people say 60% or 65% or whatever it is, young ones, 18 years and below, I think they're the ones we're talking about, being out of school and so on. And we have a challenge that if we manage them properly, you can see them on a knife edge. If you manage them properly, educate them, and develop them properly on the right side, they become the greatest force for development of our country or any country. Well-developed, well-educated, well-managed youths become a force for development. If you manage them wrongly and they fall on the other side, I think it's the exact opposite. It's a force for destroying the country. And during the SARS movement, both forces were at play. The dedicated, patriotic young men and women were saying we want change in the positive sense, in a peaceful manner, and of course the violence and so on. So that's a challenge we have. I think we ask ourselves a few questions. Education in Nigeria, is it getting better or is it getting worse? I have a feeling that there's a steady decline. I think many of the speakers have addressed this in details and all that. Worsened by coronavirus and a few points that I want to reemphasize. The gap between the rural and the urban children. The majority are, of course, in rural areas. How do we get them to have access to smartphones and other communication gadgets? Solar energy, can we have contraptions where they can capture solar energy and use it to charge their smartphones and get away from the reliance on electricity, NEPA, etc., etc.? Investment in education. Basically, are we using the money wisely? And can we do better, as a nation? Investing sufficiently and judiciously in education. The downsides have been mentioned, resulting from the closure of schools. But on the upside, is an opportunity, actually, for education managers to use the law to rethink and reposition our education strategy, to retrain the teachers to be ready for the new normal, which we're talking about, that COVID-19 is going to bring about permanent change to the way we live as people, as human beings, and so on. So there's an opportunity with the law to revisit our strategy in education and see if we can rise up to the expectation. We're now in a global village. The world, the physical boundaries in the world have been demolished by information technology. So our children are going to increasingly be in competition with children everywhere else in the world. They have to be in competition. So we've got to prepare them, not just to survive in Nigeria, but to survive anywhere in the world, and so on. So all in all, these are my suggestions. The final word is a question. Why can the Nigerian governments, federal and state governments, declare a policy and set a target that every child in school ought to have either a laptop, a smartphone, or a tablet? It's doable because Malaysia is doing it. India is heading in that direction. And I think if we're serious about education, we have to arm our children for the future to be educated properly. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure to hear from you, sir. I will now call on Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria. Professor, sir.
I don't think he's with us yet. Can we move on to Professor Damolekun for now?
Okay.
While I try to make contact with him.
Okay. I will now call on Professor Ladipo Adamoleku, a professor of public administration, a renowned scholar, and a lead public sector management specialist at the World Bank for many years, now retired. Professor, sir. Professor Adamoleku, sir.
Okay. Please unmute him. He's with us. He's here.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe he just needs.
And they say I can't start the video. Okay, you can start it if you want. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I join others in congratulating Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for taking the lead in drawing national attention to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on children's education. This laudable initiative is no coincidence, as the introduction of universal primary education in Western Nigeria in January 1955, under Chief Awolowo as the regional premier, was aimed at eradicating educational poverty. Sadly, 66 years later, due to the coronavirus pandemic that has been ravaging the planet since the first quarter of 2020, there is a real danger of an epidemic of educational poverty, not only in Western Nigeria, but throughout Nigeria. Indeed, it is a worldwide danger. COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted the education of millions of children because of the closure of schools for a varying number of months, more than 10 months in the Nigerian case, in the vast majority of countries across the continent. Until the spread of COVID-19 is brought under control, the negative consequences on education will persist. In Nigeria, primary education has suffered hugely as pupils nationwide have been out of school for more than 10 months. It's only in a small number of privately owned primary schools that some of the pupils might have been lucky to benefit in varying degrees from the introduction of emergency remote teaching and learning. And when schools reopen, it is almost certain that the pre-COVID-19 estimate of about 10 to 13 million of out-of-school children in Nigeria must have increased by 1/2 million or more. In post-COVID-19 Nigeria, children's right to free, quality primary education should be the priority of priorities for all the 36 state governments. According to Chapter 2, Fundamental Objectives and Directive Principles of State Policy, Section 18 of the 1999 Constitution, I quote, "Government shall strive to eradicate illiteracy, and to this end, government shall, as and when practicable, provide a free compulsory and universal primary education, free secondary education, free university education." I would argue that the qualifier "as and when practicable" should not apply to primary education. And the following are my reasons. One, the successful introduction and implementation of free universal primary education in Western Nigeria 66 years ago ought to mean that the implementation of the constitutional obligation should be mandatory for all state governments. I speak to you as one of the first set of beneficiaries of free primary education in 1955. I was concluding my primary school education that year. Two, although the Compulsory Free Universal Basic Education Act 2004 is factually consistent with the constitutional obligation relating to free, compulsory, and universal primary education, it is my considered opinion that the federal government's intervention for the purpose of uniform and qualitative basic education throughout Nigeria, as stated in the UBEC Act, is unwarranted in the federal system. Specifically, after reviewing the implementation of the UB Act a few years ago, I concluded that the Act should be repealed and the share of national revenue hijacked for the purpose by the federal government should be shared among the states and local governments. I added that subnational governments should have full responsibility for achieving quality basic education. The federal government's role in primary education should remain limited to prescribing minimum standards as provided for in the 1999 Constitution. Third ground for making free compulsory primary education is because Nigeria is a signatory to Sustainable Development Goals. And one of those goals is on education, SDG 4, whose aim is, I quote, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Specifically, by 2030, every country is expected to ensure that all girls and boys complete compulsory, free, equitable, and quality primary education leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. Nigeria should be able to meet this obligation. My last word is on tackling learning poverty at the primary education level. And the World Bank, I think in 2019, defined learning poverty as 10-year-olds who cannot read and understand a story in the language of instruction. I think for all the commissioners present, a big player in the private sector for education, I would like to strongly recommend that this yardstick for measuring learning poverty should be taken seriously. Once again, I congratulate the Executive Director of Awolowo Foundation on organizing this webinar on an important and topical subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we take away from that learning poverty and this should be one of our benchmarks. I would now call on Professor Wale Adebanwi. Professor Adebanwi is the first Black Rhodes Professor at St. Anthony's College, Oxford University. I would like you to please give us 5 minutes goodwill message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. I also want to join others in congratulating the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for this initiative, and especially to thank Dr. Awolowo Dosunmu for the opportunity. I will try and speak less than 5 minutes. I think the most important things have been said by everyone who spoke before me. I just want to add my perspective in terms of my own understanding of Awolowo's significance in our history. I will start by quoting something that he said many years ago. Chief Awolowo said, "The rich and the highly placed in business, public life, and government are running a dreadful risk in their callous neglect of the poor and downtrodden," unquote. Clearly, Chief Awolowo understood not just the positive possibilities of ensuring that everyone is educated, especially at the primary and secondary level, but also of the devastating consequences of not ensuring that. Contemporary Nigeria, more than ever before, proves the validity, show the validity of his vision. And this has become even more devastating because we have decided to ensure that the least capable among us are the ones who are almost always put in charge of our national affairs. And we are living with the consequences of this. And I think much of what we are experiencing with the failure of leadership in many sectors, especially at the national level, show that it's the most crucial thing, as he reminded us many times when he was here with us, is to ensure that we have the greatest capacity concentrated at the highest level of the administration of our collective affairs. As I want to commend the representatives of the states who have spoken here today, we can see the reflection of the kind of capacity that we have at the state level in what some of those speakers have demonstrated. But why is it that in spite of those kind of capacities, we have the kind of country that we still have today? It is because no matter what kind of capacity you have at these levels, once we put people who have no capacity at the center, you see that all of these problems will persist at the margins. But anyway, let me just conclude by talking about three things that I think mapped out the essential qualities of the moment in history that Awolowo demonstrated to us, the inherent capacities that we have as a people, especially with, the greatest attention paid to the development of, what he used to call man, which meant, of course, human beings as being at the center of the universe. The first is that Awolowo and his team had absolutely no doubt that it was possible to be able to create a good country in Nigeria. They convinced themselves of this first, and eventually were able to convince their people that it was possible. The second thing was that they prepared for themselves for the crucial task of political leadership as, a way in which you can demonstrate administrative excellence. They had the vision, they had the mission, they had the knowledge, and they had the will. The third was that they recruited the best team, men and women of conviction and capacity who were needed for such a task. And that is why, till today, we are able to see that we are able to continue to refer to not only the vision of that era, but also what was demonstrated in terms of the capacity for excellent governance. This is what we still miss today, and I think his ideas still constitute the guidepost for us about how to attend to the challenges of the age. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think at this point we have come to the end of the presentations, and I will be reading out some of the questions in the question and answer box. And there's quite a lot. There's been a lot of comments. I will read some comments as well. But let me quickly pose this to our panelists. I have two questions here, which I think I will first say. How can the learning losses due to COVID-19 be reduced under the prevailing circumstances? I would want to put this to Professor Oyeyinka. Oh, has he gone?
Yeah, I'm here. Do you want me to go right away?
Yes, please.
Well, I mean, just a quick point. I think the big challenge faced by most African countries, including Nigeria, is the fiscal space that has been reduced because of the two things. One, loss in revenue from oil, and also, of course, the COVID pandemic that has reduced growth. We lost, I think, 3.6% growth. So whatever has to be done now has to be financed in a different way. But I think, to be honest with you, whatever going forward now, we really need to rethink along the line that all the speakers have said. If we're able to reduce, corruption and waste in government, which are things that Chief Awolowo tried on, I don't think that it's so bad that we cannot train our children. I think we need to manage public finance better. Second is, finally, is that we need to look for innovative ways to finance education. A lot of suggestions have come on. The last one that Dr. Adiban was saying, we don't use our best people we are uncoordinated. People, I mean, look at all the people speaking on this platform. Have you heard any of them speaking to any government? They carry their knowledge. Recently, some 6 professors just died, not a word. So I think one of those is to harness what we have. We have people. And it's not just about money all the time. We have people. Look at this platform. People from the US, from everywhere speaking, but, political space in our country and in most African countries these days is all about the spoil system. People win election, gather around, share whatever it is there. I'm sorry to be speaking very bluntly, but I think we need to just harness the resources we have, both financial, knowledge, the human resources especially, and also the diaspora, as someone mentioned. A lot of people want to help, but they just don't know how to help. They don't know who to approach. And even when you make a move, you hardly have a hearing. I can tell you for sure, I've sent messages to many people. There was a Nigerian who invented the COVID PCR kit. It was tested. It was found to be as good as whatever is being used on the market. Up to today, even the bank, doing Dr. Additional push so hard for them to adopt it. They never did. They never did. So people are just comfortable with procurement, just ordering what others are doing. So to summarize, I think we need to harness what we have. We need to look around. There are Nigerians who want to help, who are very concerned and passionate about their country, but they just need a space to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Someone has asked, somebody has said, what could Lagos State have done differently to provide education to vulnerable children during a pandemic? And what do the constraints elicited by Mrs. Adefisayo imply for policies and programs speaking to poverty, particularly in rural Lagos? What would you have done differently, or what if you had all the resources?
What would we have done? That's a great question. What would we have done differently if we had all the resources? We would have ensured, first of all, we would ensure that in the most underserved area, that every child had a device that could log on to some online learning or the other. And then to support them, because it's not just devices, it's also data. And I'm glad MTN is here. So we would have negotiated earlier with these telecoms companies to give us data. But I will say, in fairness to MTN, that throughout this period, they did give us data on those devices. So we would have negotiated for more data. And then the third thing is, because in those vulnerable areas, it's also, again, beyond data. It's also the fact that they do not have access, the internet doesn't reach there, neither do radio transmissions. So we've been talking to a group now, and they set up something in California. I'm not very tech savvy, so you'll forgive me if I don't sound coherent with this particular question. But apparently there's some masts that will receive signals. It's very powerful, and we receive signals from the internet, from our service providers, and then the devices will be able to tap signals from that mast. I hope I've made sense. But in other words, those out of the way places that internet has not reached, then they too will be able to access learning. So there'll be periods when they'll download and they'll be able to get up-to-date information and so on. I think that is what I would do differently. Focus really on children in the most underserved areas. Because we now found that children, even very poor children, they were able to learn somehow. They would have an uncle or an auntie with WhatsApp, radio, television. There was WhatsApp, there was Telegram as well. So some of them were able to text their teacher and so on using their father or their mother's device. Some of them, like I said. So I think for the most vulnerable children, I would have increased their access, through deeper investment. And like I said, this year we have actually And then, of course, our budget. This year, we have significantly increased the amount we are going to spend on integration of teaching and learning with technology. So I think by the time we do that, I hope more children will come on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just interrupt, Madam Anchor? I need to acknowledge the support of AIT. They have been broadcasting us live since we started. They went off for their 8 o'clock news, and we're back online. So I just want to say a very massive thank you to AIT for their support. Thank you very much indeed.
We'll just take a few more questions because we're actually practically out of time. I'm looking for, this goes to the Ogun State government. How does the Ogun State government assure exclusive access to virtual learning? How is the government trying to help with affordability of laptop or tablet or iPad and regular power supply and Wi-Fi access for home study by those pupils? In other words,
thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. There's no doubt about it that we will need the support of every stakeholder. And that's why the key part of it will be how do we educate our parents, setting priorities right. Because if we're not careful, we might just be looking at the children in the rural area, but the children in the urban area as well. I mean, there are some parents that still have this nonchalant attitude that when your child is in public school, everything has to be provided by the government. So the key thing is we've got to look at how we can educate parents, how every stakeholder can understand, and how people can use CSR as well. And as a state, what we're coming up with is Adopt a School program, which Adopt a School program is not just focusing on just the four walls of the classroom, but how people can help with devices. And as a state as well, when I was talking, I spoke about how we're using fiber optics. I mean, Governor is actually working on that now from the Bureau of ICT, where we want children to be able to access internet. With all that, everything can be in place, but the key thing that Ogun State is also taking very seriously is the training for teachers. Because if teachers are not well grounded with the use of IT, with the use of technology, we might be missing it if we direct all the resources to just the children. So there are so many things that we're yet to do. And also, I mean, part of the things that we plan doing is also to have laptops for teachers, where we can have a scheme and we can support our teachers more. And that's why teachers are quite pleased that we've onboarded everybody on the learning management system. And I must say, and I am seriously saying this, that it has made a lot of our teachers to actually go and get their Android phones, because now they're accessing a lot of international trainings. So in all, what I'm saying here is we are definitely going to be asking for the support on CSR. As a government, we're going to do our own part, and also we expect parental engagement in this support, and also to see how we can train our teachers to be more IT savvy. Because, as I said before, what worked before COVID-19, unfortunately, cannot work again here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just read out a few comments that will not be, but I think they're important for us to take away and for us to think about. We have something here that says, how do we make radio education attractive and more universal in terms of coverage and delivery? MTN mentioned it's 15 gigabyte data, but you need a smartphone. Can we try in this country to be like India and start manufacturing cheap handsets, say for 1,000 naira, that's about $2, that at least have radio for infrastructural delivery? Any industrialist interested? Another comment, Collaborations among governments at all levels must be in place to see the national broadband plan and coverage through. The private sector is equally welcome to get engaged. The quality of our digital access will depend on this collaboration. I've always cherished the success of platforms like Coursera.org. So there is a question that I'm going to throw open, and I think it's an interesting one. We might not have the answer, but it says, what might radical education look like in Nigeria? Is free education realistic in the 21st century? What could be an alternative? I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. And on that note, we will have to start rounding up.
This is Sophia. Maybe I can address that. I can't.
Thank you. Please go on, Prof.
Yeah, I was saying that I can't propose to talk about what radical education could mean. But one of the things we haven't really thought deeply about is what types of education are most appropriate for which types of people. Apparently, our economy is not evolved enough to employ everybody, given particularly the low quality education that we provide for the masses. I think it makes sense to start thinking about tiers of education. Obviously, private education has a role, but public education, what must public education do? But we really need to think about our educational system in terms of manpower development and also in terms of, again, the demands of the economy. And I don't think that we're doing that. When I've talked to employers across Nigeria, they typically say that they don't know what schools are teaching the kids. And many of them they're not eager to hire the kids because the kids just don't have the life skills and the technical skills they don't have, and their knowledge base is questionable in many cases. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that some of the recommendations I gave, which I didn't get a chance to really talk deeply about at the very tail end, is, one of them is that the Preamble Foundation could really be a real leader. I think it has been, but could step it up with appropriate support from the foundation community through the CSR programs. Really look at these issues, what is most appropriate, how did others do it? When we've had successes around the world, how did they transform the educational system to be able to deliver the transformation of the country? I'm hoping that there would be plenty of time for conversations to happen between our private sector folks and the foundation people to really make this happen. We really do need a major initiative that would be respected by government and that would help move government forward. Because as one of the speakers said earlier, I'm not sure, particularly at the federal level, if our governments really know, I'm sorry to put it this way, what they're doing.
Thank you very much. I think on this note, I'm going to thank all the panelists for their insight into the problems we have and for preferring some solutions. What is quite clear is that we have a major challenge in this country, and it's not just about finances or economics, it's also about human resource and also about having a proper framework. We know education is on the concurrent list, and we do believe that things like primary education should be handled at the state and at the state level. Nigeria is over-centralized, and that makes it difficult for development because it has to be ground up. So we thank you, everybody, for your insight. And I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Awolowo Dosunmu to give us the closing remarks. And it has been a pleasure anchoring this, this wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ogunshola. It is now my pleasurable duty to say a massive thank you to everyone that has participated in this program, either as a panelist or as an attendee. Let me start by thanking Age Before Beauty. I thank our patron, the Obi of Onisha, for joining us here. It wasn't convenient entirely for him to do so, but he made time out to join us and to share his words of wisdom. Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness, for always being there for us. And I thank Professor Adam Olekun, who is also a member of the selection committee for the Awo Prize. He's always there too, whenever we call upon him. Thank you so much for being with us. And of course, Wale, our own Wale in Oxford. He's an Awo scholar, by the way. He's an expert on Awo, so he didn't disappoint. Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you to our anchor, Professor Ogunshola, for the competent way in which you have handled this meeting. I must thank Soji, Professor Adelaja, for a wonderful speech and for great insights into this issue. And the experience of Professor Badigeshi was obvious. Thank you very much for your presentation and for taking the trouble, all of you who have shared screens, taking the trouble to have gone into so much detail and so much trouble to make this webinar such a worthwhile venture. And I thank all our speakers. I thank particularly the government functionaries, Mrs. Adefisayo, Barrister Olaleye, Mrs. Chuyombo, and of course the MTN representative, who also happened to be a former student of Dr. Ogunsoya. I think Dr. Ogunsoya is going to have to pay me for making that linkage again. I thank Betty Abba for giving us insights from the consumers, from the people who are actually at the receiving end of all of this, the less privileged children in Nigeria. Have I left anybody out? Professor Yinka, that was a brilliant submission, and I know you have much more to give. And of course, last but not least, Dr. Ogunsoya, who has given us an insight from the private sector point of view. Now, to wrap up, it is quite clear that there is a problem. And it is also clear that we have the talents to solve that problem, if only those talents would be given the chance to spread their wings and fly. Nigeria will go to such heights that even Chief Awolowo would be clapping for us from wherever he is. There's absolutely no doubt that there are talents wasting away among the less privileged. We've heard from Dr. Ogunsoya here what can happen among the Nigerian pupils and Nigerian teachers. There's a lot of creativity, we've heard, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot can be achieved if they're given the best. We're never going to wish away the less privileged. We're never going to wish away the fact that they are in the majority of society, and that the country would be doing itself a great deal of disservice if we don't look after them, if we don't educate them, if we don't look after their interests. So yes, it's going to be expensive. Yes, there are challenges. But as I have said, and as we have seen here this evening, those challenges can be met. It is a question of will, political will. Where there's a will, there's a way. When Chief Awolowo and his team were doing it 66 years ago, they probably had less reasons to hope than we do now. So I'm glad that the Obafemi Awolowo has been able to do what we do best. In other words, provide a platform for linkages, for strategic linkages and partnerships. And I think we've started that here tonight. I have no doubt that everyone that has taken part will be willing to take this conversation forward into actionable strategies. And I will be getting in touch with you all. And I hope that we can all cooperate and collaborate to take this country to the kind of heights that Ifawolo and his colleagues envisioned. Thank you all so very much. It's been such a wonderful experience. I've enjoyed every moment of it, and I've learned a lot. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
the national anthem of the newly formed Ududuwa Nation.
Petition.